Recent scientific studies have consistently shown a higher rate of veganism and vegetarianism among African Americans compared to all other Americans. Here's the complete research. A 2016 Pew Research Center study found that 8% of African Americans identify as vegan or vegetarian, compared to only 3% of the general population. This finding was corroborated by a 2015 poll conducted by the Vegetarian Resource Group, which also found that 8% of Black people were vegetarian, compared to 3% of Hispanics and 3.4% of the overall population. A 2020 Gallup survey on changes in meat-eating habits revealed that 31% of Black people reported eating less meat in the past year, compared to 19% of white people. The trend of African Americans adopting plant-based diets appears to be accelerating. The Washington Post, citing a Gallup report, referred to Black people as the fastest-growing demographic of vegans. By the late 2010s, research consistently showed that up to 8% of Black Americans identified as vegan, compared to about 3% for the U.S. population as a whole. Several health-related factors may contribute to this trend. The National Institutes of Health estimates that 60 to 80% of African Americans are lactose intolerant, which may lead to choosing vegan diets. Diet-related conditions such as diabetes, heart disease, hypertension, and stroke are prevalent in the Black community, potentially motivating dietary changes. The disproportionate impact of COVID-19 on the African American community has heightened the importance of a healthy diet to combat obesity and diabetes. The rise of veganism among African Americans is also influenced by cultural and social factors. Some African Americans are recognizing that plant-based cuisine is rooted in African diaspora and Black American culinary traditions. African American celebrities such as athletes, entertainers, and politicians turning vegan have helped promote veganism and plant-based food. The intersectional approach in veganism has given more voice to marginalized communities within the movement. In conclusion, multiple scientific studies and surveys consistently show that African Americans have the highest percentage of vegans and vegetarians among American demographic groups, with this trend continuing to grow. The reasons behind this phenomenon are multifaceted, encompassing health concerns, cultural rediscovery, and social justice considerations. Based on the scientific studies and evidence provided, there are several key reasons why African Americans are adopting veganism at a higher rate compared to other groups. 1. Health concerns and disparities. African Americans face disproportionately high rates of chronic diseases like diabetes, hypertension, heart disease, and obesity. Adopting a plant-based diet is seen as a way to address these health disparities and improve overall well-being. 2. Lactose intolerance. The National Institutes of Health estimates that 60 to 80% of African Americans are lactose intolerant, which may lead many to choose vegan diets that exclude dairy. 3. Cultural and historical connections. Some African Americans are recognizing that plant-based cuisine is rooted in African diaspora and Black American culinary traditions. There's a growing awareness that traditional African and African American diets were historically more plant-centered. 4. Social justice and ethical considerations. Many Black vegans view their dietary choices as a form of resistance against systemic oppression and exploitation. There's a recognition of similarities between systems of oppression against animals and people of color. 5. Environmental concerns. The disproportionate impact of environmental issues on marginalized communities has led some African Americans to adopt veganism as a more sustainable lifestyle choice. 6. Influence of Black celebrities and influencers. African American celebrities promoting veganism have helped increase its popularity in the Black community. 7. Increased awareness and education. Greater access to information about nutrition and the benefits of plant-based diets has contributed to this trend. 8. COVID-19 impact. The pandemic's disproportionate effect on the African American community has heightened awareness about the importance of a healthy diet in combating obesity and diabetes. These factors combined have led to a significant increase in veganism among African Americans, with studies consistently showing that around 8% of Black Americans identify as vegan or vegetarian, compared to about 3% of the general U.S. population. Yes, there are indeed historical roots of veganism and plant-based diets in African American culture. The trend towards veganism among African Americans is not entirely new, but rather a return to some traditional practices and values. Here's an overview of the historical connections. Many traditional African diets were primarily plant-based. The African American heritage diet maintains that traditional African American cuisine was primarily plant-based, with substantial quantities of fruits, vegetables, and whole foods grown from gardens. Before the proliferation of fast food franchises in the 1970s, African Americans in cities were twice as likely to meet the dietary recommendations for fruits, vegetables, and fiber than the overall U.S. population. The dietary habits of African Americans were significantly impacted by slavery and its aftermath. During slavery, many enslaved people subsisted on plant-based diets out of necessity, often using parts of plants and animals that slave owners discarded. Post-slavery, many African Americans maintained gardens and continued to incorporate a variety of plant foods in their diets. Several African American religious and spiritual movements promoted plant-based diets. Black Seventh-day Adventists at Oakwood University in Alabama have been promoting vegetarianism since the 1890s. The Nation of Islam, founded in the 1930s, has advocated for healthier eating habits, including vegetarianism. The Rastafarian movement, which developed in Jamaica in the 1930s, promoted a plant-based diet known as Ital. The African Hebrew Israelites of Jerusalem have advocated strict veganism since the 1960s. The connection between veganism and social justice became more pronounced during and after the civil rights movement. Civil rights activist Dick Gregory, who marched with Martin Luther King Jr., argued that animal rights and civil rights were interconnected. Gregory's mentor was the original queen mother of the Black vegan movement, Dr. Alvenia Fulton, who started the first vegetarian establishment on the south side of Chicago in the early 1950s. The African Hebrew Israelites established sole vegetarian restaurants in the 1970s, which became the largest vegan restaurant chain in the world for a time. The current trend of veganism among African Americans can be seen as a reconnection to these historical roots. Many Black vegans today view their dietary choices as a form of resistance against systemic oppression and a return to healthier, more traditional ways of eating. There's a growing recognition that plant-based diets can help address health disparities in the African American community. In conclusion, while the current surge in veganism among African Americans is a relatively recent phenomenon, it has deep historical roots in African and African American culture, spirituality, and resistance movements. This historical context helps explain why veganism resonates so strongly with many African Americans today. Based on the scientific evidence provided, veganism and plant-based diets can help address several key health disparities affecting the African American community. African Americans face disproportionately high rates of chronic diseases like diabetes, hypertension, heart disease, and obesity. Plant-based diets have been shown to significantly reduce the risk of these conditions. Even after controlling for factors like education, income, and BMI, Black vegans had 70% lower odds of diabetes compared to Black omnivores. Plant-based diets are effective for both preventing and managing diabetes. Black vegetarians and vegans had 44% lower odds of hypertension and saw their total and LDL cholesterol levels cut in half compared to non-vegetarians. Plant-based diets are associated with reduced risk of heart disease. While more research is needed on specific cancer subtypes, plant-based diets are linked to lower overall cancer risk. This is significant given that African Americans have the highest mortality rate for all cancers combined. African Americans are at higher risk for chronic kidney disease. Plant-based diets have been shown to protect against both the development and progression of kidney disease. Adopting plant-based diets can help counteract the negative health impacts of systemic racism in food systems. which has led to decreased access to healthy foods in many Black communities. For some African Americans, adopting a plant-based diet represents a return to more traditional, healthier eating patterns that existed before the proliferation of fast food in Black communities. Studies have consistently shown that plant-based diets can help reduce the racial health disparities affecting African Americans across multiple health indicators. By addressing these key health issues through diet, veganism, and plant-based eating can play a significant role in reducing health disparities in the African American community. However, it's important to note that systemic changes addressing poverty, housing, healthcare access, and other social determinants of health are also necessary for comprehensive improvements in health outcomes. Based on the search results and the context provided, there are several key differences between Black veganism and mainstream veganism. Black veganism is deeply intertwined with broader social justice concerns, including racial equality, food sovereignty, and environmental justice. It connects the use of non-human animals with other social justice issues, such as racism and the lasting effects of slavery. Black veganism draws inspiration from historical movements and figures, including the Civil Rights Movement, Rastafarianism, and the Nation of Islam. It also connects to African and African American culinary traditions. While mainstream veganism often emphasizes animal rights, Black veganism places a strong emphasis on addressing health disparities in the African American community, particularly diet-related conditions like diabetes, heart disease, and hypertension. Black veganism often involves decolonizing the diet of Black Americans, reclaiming food sovereignty, and challenging systemic inequalities in the food system. Black veganism addresses the lack of diversity and representation in mainstream vegan movements, which have been criticized for being predominantly white and middle class. Black vegan chefs and cooks often focus on reimagining traditional soul food dishes and emphasizing flavorful, culturally relevant plant-based meals. Black veganism tends to focus more on addressing systemic issues like food apartheid, often referred to as food deserts, and advocating for policy changes to improve access to healthy, plant-based foods in underserved communities. Black veganism emphasizes the importance of having people of color lead animal rights activism and incorporating diverse perspectives in the movement. In essence, Black veganism is a more holistic approach that views veganism not just as a dietary choice, but as part of a broader framework for social justice, health equity, and cultural empowerment. It addresses the unique challenges and perspectives of the Black community while advocating for animal rights and environmental sustainability. Based on the search results and the context provided, Black vegans have several key criticisms of mainstream veganism. Mainstream veganism is often criticized for being predominantly white and middle class, failing to include diverse voices and perspectives. This lack of representation can make Black vegans feel isolated and excluded from the movement. Many Black vegans argue that mainstream veganism fails to recognize the intersectionality with other social justice issues, such as racism, food access, and systemic inequalities. Dr. A. Breeze Harper notes that the overwhelmingly white U.S. vegan movement often assumes that discussions about race and racism are unrelated to its goals. Black vegans often face exotification of their food and culture by white vegan communities, which can be alienating. There are instances of cultural appropriation, such as the Thug Kitchen controversy, where white authors used African American vernacular to promote vegan cooking. While animal rights are crucial, Black veganism often emphasizes a more holistic approach that includes human rights, environmental justice, and food sovereignty. Mainstream veganism is criticized for sometimes prioritizing animal welfare over human concerns. Critics argue that mainstream veganism often overlooks the socioeconomic barriers that prevent many people, especially in marginalized communities, from adopting a vegan lifestyle. This includes issues like food apartheid, often referred to as food deserts, and lack of access to affordable plant-based options. Mainstream veganism is criticized for not considering the cultural practices and traditional diets of various communities, including indigenous peoples. Some Black vegans argue that mainstream veganism can perpetuate a white savior mentality, centering white voices and experiences while marginalizing others. There's a perceived split in vegan philosophy and practice, with mainstream veganism often failing to address broader issues of systemic racism and colonialism that are important to many Black vegans. In essence, veganism for African Americans is all about the survival of African Americans to be able to enjoy a future generation. Embracing veganism gives African Americans the tools to control the diseases that are killing their community. African Americans becoming vegans in greater numbers means less African Americans will die for diabetes, heart disease, hypertension, and cancer. Becoming vegans in large numbers today translates into more African Americans living to enjoy a brighter and healthier future.